भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नानमात्रं परं ब्रह्म परमात्मेश्वर पुमान् दृशादिभिः पृथग्भावेर्भगवान् एक ईयते। नानमात्रं परं ब्रह्म परमात्मेश्वर पुमान् दृश्यादिभिः पृथग्भावेर्भगवान् एकैयते. Synonyms: Jnana, knowledge; Matram, only; Param, transcendental; Brahma, Brahman; Parama Atma, Paramatma; Ishvara, the controller; Puman, supersoul; Drishi Adi Bhi, by philosophical research and other processes; Prithak, Bhavai, according to different processes of understanding; Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead; Eka, alone; Iyate, is perceived. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead alone is complete transcendental knowledge. But according to the different processes of understanding, he appears differently, either as impersonal Brahman, as Paramatma, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or as the Purusha Avatara. Again, translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead alone is complete transcendental knowledge. But according to the different processes of understanding, he appears differently, either as impersonal Brahman, as Paramatma, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or as the Purusha Avatara. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The word Drishya Adibhi is significant. According to Jiva Goswami, Drishi means Jnana, philosophical research. By different processes of philosophical research under different concepts, such as the process of Jnana Yoga, the same Bhagavan or Supreme Personality of Godhead is understood as impersonal Brahman, and similarly, by the Eightfold Yoga system, he appears as Paramatma. But in pure Krishna consciousness or knowledge in purity, when one tries to understand the absolute truth, one realizes him as the Supreme Person. The transcendence is realized simply on the basis of knowledge. The words used here, Paramatmeshwara Puman, are all transcendental, and they refer to the Supersoul. Supersoul is also described as Purusha, but the word Bhagavan directly refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full of six opulences: wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He is the personality of Godhead in different spiritual skies. The various descriptions of Paramatma, Ishvara, and Puman indicate that the expansions of the Supreme Godhead are unlimited. Ultimately, to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to accept Bhakti Yoga. By executing Jnana Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, one has to eventually approach the Bhakti Yoga platform. And then Paramatma, Ishvara, Puman, etc., and are all clearly understood. It is recommended in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that whether one is a devotee or a fruitive actor or a liberationist, if he is intelligent enough, he should engage himself with all seriousness in the process of devotional service. It is also explained that whatever one desires which is obtainable by fruitive activities, even if one wants to be elevated to higher planets, can be achieved simply by execution of devotional service. Since the Supreme Lord is full in six opulences, he can bestow any one of them upon the worshipper. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself to different thinkers as the Supreme Person or impersonal Brahman or Paramatma. Impersonalists merge into the impersonal Brahman, but that is not achieved by worshipping the impersonal Brahman. If one takes to devotional service and at the same time desires to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord, he can achieve that. If someone desires at all to merge into the existence of the Supreme, he has to execute devotional service. The devotee can see the Supreme Lord face to face, but the Gnani or empiric philosopher and the yogi cannot. They cannot be elevated to the positions of associates of the Lord. There is no evidence in the scriptures stating that by cultivating knowledge or worshipping the impersonal Brahman, one can become a personal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nor by executing the yogic principles can one become an associate of the Supreme Godhead. Impersonal Brahman, being formless, is described as adrishya because the impersonal effulgence of Brahmajyoti covers the face of the Supreme Lord. Some yogis see the four-handed Vishnu sitting within the heart, and therefore, in their case also, the Supreme Lord is invisible. Only for the devotees is the Lord visible. Here, the statement Drishya Adibhi is significant, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is both invisible and visible. There are different features of the Lord. Let me state that again. Let me read that again. Here, the statement Drishya Adibhi is significant, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is both invisible and visible. There are different features of the Lord. The Paramatma feature and the Brahman feature are invisible, but the Bhagavan feature is visible. In the Vishnu Purana, this fact is very nicely explained. The universal form of the Lord and the formless Brahman effulgence of the Lord, being invisible, are inferior features. The concept of the universal form of the personality, the concept of the universal form is material and the concept of impersonal Brahman is spiritual. But the highest spiritual understanding is the personality of Godhead. The Vishnu Purana states, Vishnu Brahma Swarupena Swayam Eva Vyavastitaha. Brahman's real feature is Vishnu, or the Supreme Brahman is Vishnu. Swayam Eva, that is, his personal feature. The supreme spiritual conception is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yad Gatvana Nivartante Tad Dhama Paramam Mama. That specific abode called Paramam Mama is the place from which, once one attains it, one does not return to this miserable conditional life. Every place, every space, and everything belongs to Vishnu. But where he personally lives is Tadhama Paramam, his supreme abode. One has to make one's destination the supreme abode of the Lord. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantakam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Let us pay our obeisances to Sri Gurudeva, to our spiritual master, and the Supreme Lord. And Pray for clarity to help us understand the futility of repeated birth and death so our devotion matures. We're so caught up in this back-to-back repeated cycle of life and death, birth and death and birth and death and birth and death. We're like chasing our tails. And we need to get out of this. But most importantly, we need to allow our devotion to mature as we learn more and more about what devotional service really means. So today we're hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam from Canto 3, chapter 32, text 26. And this is spoken by Lord Kapiladev to his mother Devahuti. And this verse appears at the conclusion of Kapiladev's Sankhya teachings, where he resolves one of the most important philosophical questions in Vedic thought. And what are those questions? Right? So let's spend, just introspect a little bit in terms of what those questions are. In this specific verse, he's addressing those questions that are about the absolute truth. Is the absolute truth personal or impersonal? Is the Brahman higher or is it Bhagavan that's higher? Are these different realities one truth that are seen differently? Right? And so Kapiladev is answering all of these in one compact but very profound verse. Right? There are so many realizations that people have where, people look at or think about Krishna and Vishnu even, right? For that matter. They don't see the difference. They don't know the difference. So some think Vishnu is the Lord of the universe and therefore, Krishna is one of the avatars. So there are a lot of misconceptions stemming from, a lack of proper knowledge that are coming to us from bona fide and revealed scriptures. It's not about hearsay, it's not about he said, she said, but it is something that is coming from revealed scriptures. So we need to pay attention to that. So let us hear the translation again carefully, right? So that we can get a little deeper into this. So here Kapiladev is saying the Supreme Personality of Godhead alone is complete transcendental knowledge. But according to different processes of understanding, he appears differently, either as an impersonal Brahman, as Paramatma, as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, or as the Purusha Avatara. So we need to keep in mind that this verse is not sectarian. It is not about this religion or that religion. Right? It is not about this god or that god. In fact, when you think about it, Hinduism is viewed as a pantheistic religion, right? There's a pantheon of gods. There are about 33 crore gods, whether it is, a god for this or a god for that, or, it is for education or for wealth or for fame or for popularity or for power, name it, there is a god. So there are 33 crore gods that are available for us to worship. When you look at Hinduism, so-called Hinduism, right, as a religion. But again, that stems from a lot of ignorance, right? Because the scriptures very, very clearly state that there is only one God. There is one God. That is the supreme. That is the absolute truth. So, in that sense, regardless of which religion, whether it is Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism, or this or that, any of the religions, there is only one God. There is only one God. We may know him by different names and different forms, but there is only one God. So it explains, this particular verse explains why sincere seekers reach different conclusions without dismissing any of them. See, that's the beauty. The way Kapiladev is bringing this all together and putting things in perspective for us. He's not saying this is wrong or that is wrong, but he's also corroborating and saying that these are actually different features of the same single reality. And we'll get more into that, right? So he begins very decisively by saying the Supreme Personality of Godhead alone is complete transcendental knowledge. And the Bhagavatam has already established this in Canto 1. And the verse where it is said, Vadanti tatta tattvavidas tattvam yajjag jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti sabdyate. So the knowers of truth, the knowers of truth, the tattvavidas, the knowers of truth describe the non-dual absolute truth as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Right? So here, the Advaita or the non-dual knowledge does not mean formless. It means one reality without contradiction. And now Kapiladev is clarifying that further, something that is very, very critical, right? So the Brahman is the knowledge of God's existence. So think about it, right? So there is the energy and then there is the energetic. The energy is basically all of this creation. All of this creation is a form of energy, right? Even to bat our eyelids, it cannot happen by itself. It has to have some energy. There has to be some energy spent to even to bat and close our eyes to bat our eyelids. To breathe, we need energy to be able to breathe. So no matter what activity that we are performing, what to speak of creation, which is the ultimate energy, right? Because all of creation requires so much of energy. Just think about it. So that energy, again, is not happening by itself. That energy has to come from a source. And that source is the energetic, right? And that is coming from the Supreme Personality. That is the single most bona fide source that provides that energy for all of creation. And from creation comes all of everything that we see, even in this material world. So there is even what to speak of the spiritual realm, right? All of that is coming from that single source, which is defined as God, right? God has the power to be able to provide that energy. Now, that basically is saying that the Brahman, which is also described as the effulgence, it is that energy, that light energy, that effulgence coming from the source, right? And that energy is basically establishing the fact that there is the existence of God. So existence is the key operative word there. Similarly, the Paramatma, which is the localized feature, is the knowledge of God's presence, because that is the localized feature. In each of the living entities, the Paramatma is residing. So that is basically establishing God's presence. So in the Brahman, we spoke about the existence. Here we're talking about the presence of God. And ultimately, the Bhagavan is knowledge of God's personality. That's the ultimate. So you first you have the existence, then you have the presence, And then the ultimate is understanding God as not just a source of all energy, but as a personality, right? He is a person. So that personal feature is the ultimate knowledge. That is the complete knowledge that Kapildev is talking about. So here, Kapildev is implying that the knowledge is about the knower, it's about the known, and about the relationship, right? It's about the knower, like in our case. We're trying to seek knowledge, we're trying to know about things around us. Epistemology is all about understanding who we are, asking the questions, what are the origins, what is the nature, what is the source, right? So all of these questions are, so we're asking these questions. So we are the knowers. We are the seekers of knowledge. And what is the known? In this case, Kapildev is very clearly established in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the known. And then it's not just enough to know, right, but not have a relationship, right? So relationship is very, very important. Only when you have a relationship, you get to know. It's not simple for us to, it's not as simple as opening a book and reading a text and then figuring out, okay, this is Krishna. That is one of the preliminary steps, of course. But that in itself is not going to help us to know more about Krishna, right? So that relationship requires personhood. It is personal. So, in fact, I know these days, like I was going to say, the we we cannot associate or we cannot relate to something that does not have life. For instance, a door or a wall, or a floor or something like that. Obviously, we don't have a relationship with that. And in fact, with the popularity of AI these days, where people are even relating to digital personalities or digital entities like Alexa and so on, right? So these are obviously, they're not fulfilling. They're artificial. They don't go beyond a certain point. They're not true, right? At the end of the day, they can perform a few functions, but at the end of the day, they are not true relationships. Yeah? The true relationships are those relationships that last. They have to be lasting relationships. It's not for a minute, a moment, a day, a week, and so on. These are eternal relationships that we need to focus on. So the principle should always be that we focus on something that is eternal, not the temporary. The temporary is what is characteristic of this material world. And that is the reason why our scriptures, Sadhu, Shastra, and Sangha, all are telling us, constantly reminding us, don't sweat the small things. Don't focus on where we are and, this things in this material world, which are so temporary. They're full of misery. Why are we focusing, spending our time on this? We don't have to dwell on it. We don't have to neglect them. Obviously, we have to live our lives. We still have to get by in the day. We still have to put food on the table. We still have our prescribed duties. We still have our responsibilities. But that doesn't mean we lose the big picture. And that's what the absolute truth is all about. And that's what our scriptures are telling us. That's what Krishna is telling us. So in the same first canto, Sutta Goswami is addressing the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya, right? And he says, Vasudeva Paraveda, Vasudeva Paraveda, Vasudeva Paramakha, Vasudeva Parayoga, Vasudeva Parakriya, Vasudeva Param Nanam, Vasudeva Param Tapa, Vasudeva Paro Dharmo, Vasudeva Paragati. Paragati is the supreme goal. So he's saying, so the translation, and I'll read that. In the revealed scriptures, the ultimate object of knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The purpose of performing sacrifice is to please Him. Yoga is for realizing Him. In other words, yoga is not for improving, our sex life or improving our, reducing our cholesterol or, improving our blood pressure and bringing it down within limits. That's the point. The complete point is lost there in the world we live in today. You have all of these yoga centers, for the most part, are focusing on the wrong things, things that are very temporary, things that are going to be destroyed, by the agent of time. We're not always going to remain young. We're getting older by the minute, by the second. There's no question about that. Similarly, all fruitive activities, again, let me read that. All fruitive activities are ultimately rewarded by Him only. He is the supreme knowledge, and all severe austerities are performed to know Him. Again, think about it. Dharma, as we hear about, is talking about artha kama moksha, right? About how we, should be engaging in properly conducting ourselves in activities that can increase our artha, kama, and moksha. And even at best, moksha is about liberating ourselves from what? From this material world. Because the material world is a nasty place to be in. We can take only so much of it, and after a while, it gets to us. And so, human beings, we want always to be in a better place, in a much more comfortable place. So, we want to get away from this miserable place. And hopefully, that conclusion and that realization dawns upon us at some point in time, and hopefully sooner than later. And so, dharma is helping us achieve that goal. But that in itself is not complete because it is only helping us, in a sense, getting away from this miserable material world. But it is not taking us to a destination which is eternal. It may afford us a better life, maybe in the next lifetime. Maybe if not in this planet, in a better planet, in a higher planet, and maybe a higher planet, and then another higher planet, and you're just going into higher planets, including Swargaloka, which again is a common misconception. And people think Swargaloka is heaven and therefore, everything is fine and dandy. But even Swargaloka, the lifetime is finite. At some point in time, that lifetime, even if it is hundreds of thousands of years of enjoyment and pleasure and comfort, is going to end. And what happens? We come right back to the beginning. It's like playing snakes and ladders. Tuk, 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 tuk. You go to the snake, go up the ladder, and then you get bitten by a snake, and then you have to come all the way down, and you end up having to start from scratch again. So this cycle is going on and on and on and on, and we tend to focus on the temporary. I mean, that's where Maya is getting us. The external energy is acting on us in a way that is keeping us completely focused on these kinds of things that are temporary. And even if we get a glimpse of comfort or glimpse of happiness, we think, that is great. But the moment we do that and we get that, we indulge, and next minute, again, the cycle repeats itself. There's karma acting on us and dragging us down. So there are karmic reactions that pull us down. So Krishna very, very clearly says in the Bhagavad Gita itself, Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. So there are very, very, very few people. After many, 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 many births, one actually exercises his or her spiritual intelligence to surrender unto the Lord, to understand who that Supreme Personality is, to be able to surrender even, right? Knowing that Supreme Personality is everything, it is the absolute. So Kapila Dev is not introducing a new idea, but he is confirming the Bhagavatam's conclusion that there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's a person, and we need to instead get to know him. So all these Vedas, all these scriptures, the Upanishads, the Puranas, Shrutis, Smritis, all of this are being given to us for what? There's one purpose. So one purpose is not to become a scholar and win the Nobel Prize for that, but to be able to understand the source, that supreme personality of Godhead, so that we can then engage in devotional service, so that we can actually build our relationship with this beautiful, wonderful, loving, supreme personality. So then the next aspect that I'd like to discuss is about, building that, what is that process of really getting to understand Krishna? And that is really the heart of this verse. So Kapiladev is saying, or rather, he's not saying that the absolute truth changes, but rather it is our process of understanding that changes what we can perceive. So let's talk about the Brahman realization first, right? So the Brahman realization is all about jnana, right? So through philosophical negation, right? Neti, 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 one realizes it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not that, and therefore, right? So through a process of elimination, the Brahman realization comes about that there is something that is eternal, something that is beyond this temporal life that we lead. There is an absence of material qualities. It is completely pure. It's just pure. Like, for instance, the effulgence that we're talking about. The effulgence is that brightness of light where there is it's completely pure. There is no contamination of any material qualities in there. But that also means that this effulgence is undifferentiated. It is completely without any differentiation, meaning everything is the same. Everybody, everything is the same. And we all know from the scriptures again that there is so much variegatedness, not only in the spiritual world, even in this material world. There are so many, when you look out the window, you see so many different kinds of trees, so many different shades of green, even. The leaf of one tree is different from the leaf of another tree. There are so many roses in your rose bed. Of course, right now we are trying to get through the Chicago winter. I'm at least seeing some green. All the snow has, finally gone away for now. It may come back again next week and everything becomes white. And that's how I see the analogy. We will be moving back from this variegatedness into the Brahman realization of having nothing but white snow. Everything is under it. It's completely covered, right? So the snow covers everything. And so all we see is snow. And so there's no variegatedness. How long are you going to be in the snow? For a person that hasn't seen the snow for the first time, maybe, oh, it's great. Let's get there. Let's have fun. We see all these beautiful pictures of people skiing down snow slopes and having all of this fun. But even that, after a while, is going to end, right? That pleasure, that feeling, that first time experience is gone. Because it is a snow, 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 snow. It's just white, 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 white everywhere. Similarly, the Brahman effulgence is also nothing but brightness, nothing else. So you're just suspended. So these so-called jnanis perform these severe austerities and finally get a hold of their senses to be able to focus on the Brahman or the Brahma Jyoti to be able to then get to that destination. And having gotten there, they are now suspended for eons, for years and years and years and years and years. Even from a celestial perspective, which is way greater than what we experience as a 1 year in our lifetime, in a human life, for instance. To do what? They're just suspended there in that effulgence. There's nothing else happening there. So after a while, obviously, the Atma is active. Sat Chit Ananda, right? So that is inherent, that's intrinsic to the Atma. And at some point in time, the Atma is fed up. It gets vexed. It's like, I'm not doing anything. There's nothing I can do here. There's no activity. I'm just suspended there. Yes, it is beautiful. It's uncontaminated, no material quality, blah, blah, blah. It's eternal. But that peace, that bliss is disturbed by the lack of activity. So it is kind of contradicting itself. So then that Atma then desires to come back into a place where there is activity. Lord Brahma in the 10th canto also confirms this. Okay, he says, those who consider themselves liberated but neglect your divine lotus feet, my Lord, they fall down again. Lord Brahma is saying that. Okay. So this is Lord Brahma. There is the pastime that most of us have heard, right? And very intriguing, where Lord Brahma, who is the most Brahman realized personality in this universe, he doesn't understand who that cowherd boy is, that attractive cowherd boy who's getting everybody's attention. Everyone wants to be with him, everyone loves him, and he is the center of everything that is happening there in Vrindavan. And so he wants to check that and see, who is this little boy? Who is this? And in that fury, he actually engages in stealing all of the cowherd boys, stealing all of the calves that they were tending to, thousands of them, and keeping them in a cave for not just a moment, but for an entire year. And as we know from the past time, Krishna actually manifests each and every cowherd boy, every gopa, and every calf through the minutest detail, including their, the way they look, they speak, they talk, so that the parents are not in anxiety by any means that their children are missing, that their calves are missing. And it's Krishna replicating himself in each and every one of them. He's expanding himself. And so it is said from the scriptures that the parents actually get more attracted to their children than ever before, because this Krishna is personally presenting himself as their son or as the calf to the cow. So the cows are giving more milk. The parents are becoming so much more loving. The interactions are just becoming so much more intensely loving. And that's the intrigue and that's the mystique in how, once you get to interact with Krishna, the reciprocity that comes about from interacting with Krishna, it becomes intense. We may have glimpses at best, maybe for a microsecond, a nanosecond even, but even that is something that hits us and creates an impact in such a way you feel like, oh, can I get it back again? Can I get it back again? That experience is so sublime. It is so different than everything else that we experience in terms of happiness or bliss in this material world. Totally inexplicable. It is something that we can only experience. We cannot explain, we cannot say it in words. You just have to experience it yourself. And I'm sure most of us have experienced that at some point in time. So can you imagine, for that whole year, the parents are experiencing that bliss by interacting with their children, but they're really interacting with Krishna in the form of their children. And similarly for the cows, even for that matter. So Brahma is completely wiped out. I mean, he's boggled, he's completely, lost. How is this even possible? So finally, he comes to a realization this is not an ordinary soul. This is Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality. And he comes down and offers his, these beautiful prayers, begging for forgiveness from Krishna. And when he starts off by saying, Krishna, I am actually getting to see you. I am so sorry for what I've done, but the sweetness of your personal form is so much greater than all your opulences. So it is not just about having a very knowledge-based understanding of Krishna, but it is about the engagement with that personal form of Krishna that makes it so much sweeter. And even Brahma is, being Brahma, is admitting. So it directly answers the question why Brahman realization itself is incomplete, right? Because Brahman realization may remove suffering, but it does not provide um, positive engagement. There is no interaction, there's no activity as such, right? So when there is no interaction, it becomes very blah, right? There's nothing going on. And after a while, that dies out. But if there is an engagement, a positive engagement, that interaction builds the relationship and the relationship gets better and better and better. And that's how it is with Krishna. Most relationships, in contrast, in the material world, as people get more and more closer, more and more familiarity. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? Yeah, and a lot of us, even this we see this in the work day, in the work life, in the work environment. We even see it at home. As that familiarity becomes more and more intense, there is a lot more and more contempt, right? The spouses are getting at each other, there's a lack of appreciation, things are taken for granted, mistakes happen, all of these things that just come about with familiarity and with that close interaction in this material world. But flip side, the same, principle behind interaction leads to further engagement when we're doing it with Krishna. That interaction, because Krishna is reciprocating. When Krishna reciprocates, it's very satisfying. It is from the heart. It's not based on externality, but it is a connection with the heart directly. So this is where Buddhism, for instance, differs from Bhakti Yoga, because when we talk about suffering in this material world, right? So Buddhism is focusing on how do we get the suffering out of people's lives. Buddha was a very compassionate individual, very, very compassionate individual. He could not see another person suffering. There was so much suffering in the world when he was exposed to it at a young age that he said, why do people have to suffer so much? And so Buddhism is about how do we completely stop the suffering. And the root cause for suffering is, for the Buddhists, is that there is desire. Desire causes suffering. But if we dig deeper, our scriptures tell us that it is not just the desire, but it is ignorance. Ignorance, straying away from the Supreme, and we're trying to engage in our own material well, enjoying the activities, enjoying the free will that we've been given, that causes suffering, right? So the Buddhists are constantly meditating on that formless void that only takes them to the point of Brahman realization, right? So on the flip side, we need to take a moment to reflect that that is the attractiveness of Krishna consciousness, meaning we are not focusing on this formless void, which takes us only to a certain point, but we're focusing on engaging with the Supreme Personality. That personal engagement, that active engagement, that loving exchange is what is so attractive about Krishna consciousness. It's an active process. We're constantly engaging. No matter what we're doing, we're constantly engaging in, engaging with Krishna. whether it is reading the scriptures or whether we're chanting, doing japa, or we're chanting in terms of kirtan, are we, cooking for Krishna, are we even honoring the prasadam, right? Taking the prasadam that we're getting from Krishna. So all of these things are engagement. And these are different forms of devotional service. And that is the medium by which we get to know Krishna. And so that is the attractive part. It is the simple way of addressing a very complex problem. And we'll get to that a little more. So that's the Brahman feature that we spoke about. Now let's talk about the Paramatma feature, right? Because that is also mentioned. So the Paramatma is more for the Dhyana yogis, right? So through Dhyana yoga, people are able to focus on the inner self. So they're trying to stay as fixed as possible in trying to, through meditation, understand the inner self. And one realizes ultimately the Lord in the heart, the Paramatma feature. So one realizes that, but that takes a lot. It's a very long, drawn out process and requires a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, a lot of effort, especially in Kali Yuga that we're living in. It's very difficult to even keep our heads straight for a moment, right? Our thoughts in place for even a moment. We're constantly being pushed and pulled in a million different directions. The mind share for everything, is just reducing because the things that are hitting us, begging for our attention is just increasing exponentially, even on a daily basis. But the important part here is that the Paramatma realization, even if it is achieved, has, a localized feature where there is no interaction, right? There is no interaction. It is like a neutral entity that is living within ourselves, that is witnessing everything that we're doing, that is, very neutral. The free will is given for us to be able to perform whatever we want, do what we want, the activities that we want. But this witness, even though it is the localized feature of the Lord Himself, is not interfering in our lives. He's not interfering in our free will. Krishna is there as the Paramatma in every one of us, in every living entity. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 13, Upadrashta Anumantas cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. So it is said that there is another being who is the transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and the permitter. So he's overseeing all of our activities and he's permitting, things he's allowing us to do. But again, the karma is still ours. Krishna is completely free from all of those karmic reactions, even though he is within our body. So that's something that we need to understand. But just because Krishna is in our body and we are performing these activities, Krishna is taking the karma. No, sorry, that doesn't happen. Krishna is overseeing it. In that sense, he's neutral. So anything good happens is yours. Anything bad happens is also yours. You have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility for our actions. And so that is the Paramatma feature which gives us only or takes us only so far. Right? Like I said, it is very neutral. And most importantly, it lacks the reciprocal rasa, right? So in other words, we're not really interacting with the Supreme Personality within us. The Paramatma feature that is within us, we're not really interacting with this. So this personality is just sitting there and watching us doing various things in our life. He knows our thoughts, he knows what we're doing, he knows what we're about to do, things like that. He's completely, but he's not interfering in our free will. And as a result, we are also not making the effort to engage with the Paramatma. Okay? So that brings us to the third important one or feature, that Kapila is talking about, in this case being the Bhagavan. Okay? So, through loving devotional service, so this entire canto where he's talking to his mother, he's basically, it started with a simple question where Mother Devahuti is asked, how do I get out of all of this? What do I need to do differently? And so he started to explain, the Sankhya philosophy, the science of the soul, and what it means. And he finally brings Mother Devahuti to understand what devotional service means and the importance of devotional service. And therefore, devotional service is the common denominator. It's the fundamental principle in terms of engaging with the Supreme Lord. And it's only through devotional service can one understand who Bhagavan is and what the Bhagavan feature is all about. It's only through devotional service that the Lord, on His accord, it's not on our terms, it's on His accord. Krishna very gladly, because He's a Bhakta Vatsalya, right? The moment we engage in devotional service, Krishna is so pleased. He just wants to open His heart and He wants to reveal Himself. He wants to engage with you. So through that revelation, we understand His form, His qualities, His pastimes. And we, most importantly, we see that reciprocation. We see that that loving exchange that is happening, that engagement. And that is why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Bhaktyamam avijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha. Bhaktyamam. So only through bhakti can one know me? Can I be known as I am? My tattvata, the truth behind who I am, is revealed only when you engage in devotional service. It is not book knowledge, it's not academic, it's not scholarly thinking, it is not speculation, right? It is not a process of elimination. It is not dry analysis, right? None of those. But instead, Krishna is asking something very simple, something very fundamental, something very genuine. He's saying, just engage in devotional service. Talk to me, serve me, worship me. Yat karoshi yadashnasi, yat juhosi dadasi, yat tapasya kaunteya, tat kurushva madarpanam. Just whatever you're doing, whatever you're eating, whatever you're offering, whatever you're performing in terms of an austerity, do it as a service to me. I will accept it. And He's not just accepting it and saying, me, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. He is giving much more back to us. Krishna doesn't need anything. He doesn't need anything. He's completely self-sufficient. And we keep forgetting that. We keep thinking, oh, I'm giving my money to the temple. Oh, I'm giving my time to the temple. Or I'm giving my time to Krishna. That is very flawed thought. Why should I do this? Why do I have to listen to somebody else who's telling me to apply my service in a specific way? I can do it the way I want to do it. But that is flawed thinking. That thinking is, again, centered around us. It's a very egocentric way of thinking. Why? Because we're putting ourselves in the center. We're not thinking about Krishna. Vrindavan Prabhu yesterday in his class brought up that very important and very critical point that, when he was reading the verse, and the verse was talking about a pure devotee to a pure devotee, nothing is agreeable or disagreeable. He or she just does it if it is pleasing Krishna, right? Our services have to be with the fundamental principle of pleasing Krishna. If Krishna is not pleased, it doesn't make any sense. You could jump up and down, you could do a lot of different things, but it doesn't make any sense. So therefore, it doesn't always mean that we like what we're doing. There's, good example that comes to my mind is, my one of my god brothers left everything on the instruction of his spiritual master. Left his wonderful career, a wonderful job, left everything, left the country, came here, reestablished, standards and a normalcy in the temple, which was so required, a couple of decades ago, I'm talking about, when things were going south, things were really breaking down. People were losing the whole aspect, the whole perspective of what it means to be a devotee. So he came, he left everything. And this god brother was, so focused on preaching more than anything else. He was not into administration at all. But since it was asked of him by his spiritual master, he left, he dropped everything and he came here and he dedicated himself to that. So what I'm getting at is, in principle, there could be things that are not agreeable to us. There may be things that we don't want to do or may not be suitable for us. Not we feel like, why do I need to do this? Man, I'm not comfortable doing this. But if it is the higher principle is if it is pleasing Krishna and if it is being requested in terms of a service to Krishna, then for a devotee, it doesn't, the devotee should, just put everything else aside and be able to do that. So this is something that we all need to inculcate. I mean, I'm telling myself primarily, starting with me. This is something that we should all inculcate as devotees in terms of services that are given to us. Do it to the best of our ability. Don't let any compromise. In the association of devotees in Sadhu Sangha, there will be different personalities, and we are all in different stages of our journey. Let's not take that lightly, but at the same time recognize that we are all at different stages in our journey. Therefore, some are far more advanced and some are not. And we are somewhere in that mix. We ourselves are carrying all this baggage and trying to move forward, trying to plod forward. It is difficult in this material world, but that's why, Krishna has given us the sadhu sangha. And Prabhupada has made it even easier, saying, through sadhu sangha, if you focus through all the books that he's written, through all the scriptures he's given, and our preceptors, our spiritual masters are giving their lives and sacrificing so much, going from place to place to place, making it even easier by taking Srila Prabhupada's instructions, taking the instructions from the Srimad Bhagavatam, taking instructions from the Bhagavad Gita and all the other scriptures to make it so much more realizable for us, not just understanding in terms of language, but being able to make it practical, more consumable for us to be able to do what we can in day-to-day life, in practical ways, so that it is not just something that is sitting there in an academic world, in a scholarly world, right? It's actually bringing it down to what we can do in a day-to-day situation and day-to-day circumstance, how we apply ourselves, how we think, how we should be changing our thinking to be able to apply ourselves in a way that actually pleases Krishna. That is Krishna consciousness, changing our consciousness, modifying and realigning our consciousness so that we're pleasing the master of the senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. So that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness, and that's what we need to constantly remind ourselves in things that we do and say. What we say is very important. My god brothers would tell me, it's very, very important how we speak and how we carry ourselves. We cannot be circumstantial. A devotee is never circumstantial. But more importantly, the devotee is focused in the service of Krishna. So everything that he says or does, or she says or does, is with that intent of being able to please Krishna, to be able to serve Krishna, right? Easier said than done, but this takes practice. And that is why we're given this sadhu sangha. This is why we're given this playground where we need to constantly work on. Okay, so the Bhagavan feature is so important because it is that is the source where we can actually have a loving exchange. Someone who does not judge us. If we have engagement in our material world, even if it is with our own child or with our spouse or with our boss or with our co-worker, there is always that judgment that comes in, right? The people tend to be judgmental. Why is he saying this? Why is she doing that? Why is this? Why is that? All of these things happen, right? Egos come in and all of that. But when you're dealing with the eternal, with the Supreme Personality, that loving exchange is completely different. You never have Krishna judging us and saying, you're a bad person or you're thinking of bad behaviors or, this, that. Never judgmental. But instead, that engagement, even if we're doing something wrong, we could fall, but Krishna is there to pick us up and give us another chance and another chance and another chance. He's so tolerant. But we tend to take advantage of that and continue doing what we're doing. And see, so that's where this realization is so important. And that's what Kapila Dev is saying, that by engaging in devotional service, some of these bad things will fall away by themselves. We don't even have to focus on them. It's not like I need to starve myself to be able to lose weight. As I do exercise, and in this case, I'm talking about exercising our spiritual muscle, automatically all the bad things, the bad fat, the bad activities will fall by the wayside. We don't have time for the bad activities to happen anymore. We don't have time or the space or the mind share to have those bad thoughts invade our brains. So at some point in time, it's going to go away. But if I focus on only the bad things, those impressions, I remember Balaram Prasad Prabhu mentioning even just a few days ago, saying those impressions stick in our heads. And when those impressions can drive us, right, to doing wrong things, thinking, feeling, acting, thinking, feeling, willing, and acting, to do some of the wrong things. So that's because we are focused on the wrong things here. We're dwelling on the wrong things instead of rechanneling and redirecting our thoughts, our intent, and our, in terms of our improving our engagement with the Supreme. Okay? So the Bhagavan feature is so very important for us to understand at the most fundamental level, not at an academic level, but at the most fundamental level, what that means. And Kapila Dev in this verse it's a very profound text. Very profound in that sense because it is giving us a very clear picture of what these three features are, that they are not different. Again, they are all relating back to the same reality. And the profundity is that we have to understand that and apply ourselves in taking that understanding further through devotional service, through loving exchanges. Okay, I am running out of time here. I know I've gone a little over an hour. I just want to, mention a few, maybe a few pastimes just to, give us a little more insight into some of these things. For instance, when we hear about the Brahman, the Paramatma, and the Bhagavan features, right? And we've heard different analogies. The analogy that I can think of right off the bat, very simply put, you're seeing a mountain from a distance. And when you see the mountain from the distance, it's pretty hazy, right? You don't have a clear picture. You can't see the trees. You can't see a lot of the detail that is on the mountain. So that's very far away, and that's the Brahman realization. But as you get closer, the features become a little more distinct, a little more visible in terms of the trees, the flora, the fauna, and stuff like that. And so that is the Paramatma feature. And then once we get to the mountain itself, we climb, 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 and get to the summit. And from there, you look around. I mean, you get the beautiful view, right, which all of us cherish. And that is the Bhagavan feature, right? So it is not that the mountain is changing. The mountain is not changing. It's not moving. The mountain is not changing in terms of its detail. It's the same mountain. But it is the position of where we are relative to the mountain that keeps changing, right? As we get closer and closer to the mountain, our perceptions change, our visibility gets better, and we see what we have to see, right? Similarly, the four Kumaras, for instance, if you look at it, the four Kumaras were under the age of 5. They were completely pure. They were free from all contamination. They were Brahman realized. Just like Lord Brahma, they are sons of Lord Brahma. They were completely Brahman realized. But even they, and so they were very free to move from, planet to planet to planet, and they even could go into the spiritual realm, the Kumaras. And so when they went into the spiritual realm and they were observing the beauty of the spiritual, I mean, that's a completely different, I mean, it's going to take several hours, if not days, to be able to even describe some of the beauty of, the spiritual realm in terms of the variegatedness and, the plain beauty of this, the flowers, the people and everything else. And so when the Kumaras were there in the spiritual planets and they were going from planet to planet, they were observing there was so much beauty, even in the flowers for that matter. And but even like, there were flowers that you don't even see here. So beautiful, so fragrant, so attractive. Completely, it was a world of difference compared to the flowers that we have here in the material world, even the parijatas of the world, the kadambas of the world, and so on. There were so many different varieties. But even those flowers were offering, they were in awe and respect of Tulasi. And they were like, wow, look at that. They're offering, services to Tulasi, and Tulasi in turn is offering, they saw Tulasi being offered in garlands that were adorning Krishna, and Krishna could have the prettiest of flowers, but he had garlands made of Tulasi. And so Tulasi is very, 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 very special to Krishna. So in that sense, even and when they saw Tulasi adorning Krishna, and when they saw Krishna in the personal form, all that Brahman realization was completely, it paled in comparison to that attractiveness of to be able to see Krishna in person, right? So bhakti, it's not like the Brahman realization dissipated or, went away and it was negated, but it gave more meaning to what the Brahman realization is in relation to Krishna. So that's very important. Similarly, Sukadev Goswami is another good example, because Sukadev Goswami was in the womb of his mother for 16 years and didn't want to come out. So he was completely Brahman realized when he finally made his appearance in the material world. But then, as you can see, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam was recited, in this case, in this yuga, or in this cycle of yugas, where he is basically relating to the wonderful pastimes of Krishna. And you can hear the attraction that he has for these pastimes of Krishna, or the personal feature of Krishna. Now, he is the one who, like I said, was completely Brahman realized. And he was an Atmaram. That famous verse in the Bhagavatam also is about the Atmarams who have absolutely no material desires, absolutely zero material desire. But even these Atmaramas are attracted to Krishna, which is saying that Krishna is transcendental to everything that is material. And so that Bhagavan feature, that personal feature of Krishna, is so, so very important for us to understand and relate to, so that we can engage in loving devotional service, so that we can have those loving exchanges, and so we can have Krishna reciprocate to us as well. So there are some practical takeaways. So in other words, do not dismiss the other realizations. Instead, we need to understand their scope. Each one has its place, okay? Each one is partial unless we get to the Bhagavan feature, which is complete, okay? So we need to, in principle, choose the process that is whole, not just relief from suffering, for instance, suffering from this material world, or liberation from this material world, moksha as we call it, right? That is not what moksha is all about. Moksha is about being able to spontaneously serve the the Lord through devotional service. And bhakti, the devotional service, is not sentimental. Instead, it is the complete epistemology. That's what we were talking about, right? Where these fundamental questions are asked about who are we, what is the purpose in life, what is the origin, what is the nature of a living entity, and all of these questions that are philosophical in nature. I mean, all of those things are completely answered through devotional service, through experience. So Lord Kapilidev ends his teachings by removing any confusion. And I hope, there's no confusion left in any of our heads at this point in terms of the differences between the different features, right? The partial and the complete feature that we spoke about. So even though there are many features of the Lord, there is only one Lord. He is one. The absolute truth is one. The realizations are many. Okay. The completeness lies in the Bhagavan feature, as we spoke about. Okay. Ete chamsa kalapamsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Okay. So that Bhagavatam itself is establishing that fact. But knowledge and detachment by themselves are not enough. They're not enough. One needs to engage in devotional service so that we can actually make progress and really reap the benefits of that. So Krishna is all transcendental. Now the issue is, one may ask, if Krishna is transcendental, it means that he is beyond our material senses. Adhokshaja. If he is beyond our material senses, how are we to even understand something that is transcendental? It's kind of contradicting, right? Something that is transcendental, how do we understand? Our material senses will have limitations. They can only go up to a certain point. And we try to fit everything within that certain point. That's what the scientists are doing day in and day out, throughout their careers, throughout their lifetimes, doing their PhDs and postdoctorals and everything else, trying to just fit everything into that box that we know. But we know, as spiritualists, as spiritual practitioners, we know that there is something that is transcendental. There's just simply got to be something transcendental because creation couldn't have happened by itself. And there is a complete set of discussions that we can have on that topic alone, right? So, question is, if something is transcendental and beyond our material senses, how can we apply our material senses to know Krishna? So the only way is if he reveals himself, right? If he chooses to reveal himself, then we can understand. Otherwise, there's no way we can understand. But why would he reveal himself to us? Unless we call out to him to reveal himself, he's not going to reveal himself. And it's not as simple as just asking, calling out to him, saying, Krishna, reveal yourself. No, that's not going to happen. It's like, we're in the well or in a dark well, and there's a passerby who's going by the well. And if we're not calling out to the passerby and saying we are in trouble, hey, help, 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 the passerby is going to think, oh, people in the well are having fun there, they're swimming there, and he'll just walk by. But instead, if we stop that passerby by calling out loudly and saying, it's dark in here, it's dingy in here, it's dangerous, please get us out of here. Then the passerby looks at that, hears us, comes running, and then he says, okay, I'll get you help. And he's, trying to help us get out of that well, right? So someone has to pull us out of the well. Otherwise, we're just going to be, floundering in this well. And a lot of us, for the majority of the population, right, humanity around us, is only living in that well and thinking the well is it. There's nothing better than the well. So just stick in the well, play in the well, swim in the well, get hurt a little bit, and then, jump to another portion of the well and then live in it. So there's not even the realization that the well is a deep, dark, dingy, dirty, dangerous, all these place. We need to get out of that mindset and think about how do we get onto something that is more transcendental, something that is more permanent, something that is more eternal. And that is why we have to get that realization, number one, and two, apply ourselves in that realization through devotional service, because it is only through devotional service can we engage with Krishna. And when that engagement happens, transcendence happens, right? Otherwise, Krishna is going to say, oh, you're having fun in the well, so why do you need me? Krishna is just going to move on, right? So, to get his attention, we need to call and call very sincerely through devotional service. And by the way, this calling is not the calling we're talking about through AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon or any of those. Those can claim that they have the best coverage even in the most remote areas here on earth. But they're not going to get us to Krishna. They're not going to get us to our ultimate destination. So, on the lighter side. So, let us therefore pursue Lord Kapiladev's instruction to its natural conclusion, which is engage in loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. With that, I'd like to close the class for today. I hope it was meaningful, at least to a certain extent. Some connections, some light bulbs came on, and this applies to me as well. I'm hoping that I can apply some of the things that I've spoken about in my day to day life so that I can make it better and more permanent and not just circumstantial. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Krishna conscious week ahead. Hare Krishna. वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Prabhu, Vrindavan Prabhu, Hare Krishna. I see you there. Any questions? If not, we can close the class. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.